The following program does not necessarily represent the views and opinions of Reality Radio 101, its advertisers and sponsors, or its listening audience. Listener discretion is advised. Good afternoon and welcome to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowski, where mind, mood, and what matters to you are discussed. We're broadcasting live from Toronto, Ontario, Canada on Reality Radio 101. To send us an email right now, our email address is instudio101@gmail.com. And now, right to your host of the Bear Psychology Radio Show, Dr. Anna Baranowski.
Hi everyone, I'm so glad to be with you here again today, bearing witness to evolving mood, mind, health. You know, as usual, we have conversations about trauma recovery, relationships, work, and life adventures. And of course, we've all been on a bit of an adventure in the past year. I'm delighted to have a guest today who is going to speak about her new book, which actually just recently was launched, and that is Mindfulness and Mysticism. But actually, when we first started the conversation about having a radio show with Ora Nadrich, it was Live True, a mindfulness guide to authenticity. And I am really excited to speak with Ora today. We've had a couple of conversations already this morning, and I'm excited to hear what she has to say about her approaches and her vision and what is bringing her to this work with mindfulness. She is an author and a speaker and a mindfulness coach, and she comes with some depth of understanding as the founder and president of the Institute for Transformational Thinking. And I want to read a little bit about what Marianne Williamson says about Ora. Marianne Williamson is a New York Times bestselling author, and she was actually a presidential candidate in the 2020 election. So Ora Nadrich is a treasure. Her voice bears the passion of her own experience. She's been able to reach deep into our hearts because she's culled so much wisdom from her own. When she speaks, I listen. When she writes, I read. When she gives advice, I heed it. Her sparkle and power are not to be missed. So Ora has a lot to offer us today. And the one thing I'm really interested about is her other publication, which I actually have not seen. I've just skimmed a few articles about it. And this is a publication and actually a workshop as well, the Says Who method. And it's a step-by-step process of confronting our negative thoughts, which are often what creates obstacles in our lives, providing both tangible and practical lessons, or as students are able to address and overcome negative thoughts and outlooks to live their lives at their highest potential. Now, obviously, you know, all of you that I talk a lot about trauma. And so, you know, being able to actually address, you know, where we are stuck in our minds, especially if we've experienced something very difficult, you know, having a way of addressing that inner landscape, that kind of profound place where we get stuck in repetitive thinking and struggles of the mind or old memories coming up, and just the exhaustion that goes along with managing it and feeling it and facing it. So Ora is going to give us some understanding of her various books and her understanding with thinking and how it impacts our life every day. And before I do that, I want to invite you, as I do every show, to email us at instudio101@gmail.com if you have questions for Ora or myself throughout our radio show today. And I want to just very graciously say thank you for joining us today, Ora. And I'm so glad that we're going to get a chance to hear about what you're doing and the journey you've been on in your writing as well. So welcome.
Hi, Anna. Thank you so much for having me.
Delighted, absolutely. So I understand from some of your writing that you've kind of gone on your own journey, getting to a place where you start writing about living authentically and, what you've been through, how you actually arrived at mindfulness.
Well, when I got into the wellness field, I realized that in the past, so many of the contemplative practices were really the very things that helped me on my psychospiritual journey, things like meditation and contemplation and journaling and all that. And I was a meditator myself, starting very early on. I was an actress for 10 years. So when I was acting, I myself looked into things that could help me, deal with the stresses that brought. So I became a transcendental meditator, TM, for any of those that know about transcendental meditation. It's a mantra-based meditation, and it helped me tremendously at that time in my life. And once I became a committed meditator, I wanted to learn more, and mindfulness really wasn't in the mainstream at the time. And I was an avid reader of the wellness practices, and I did come upon mindfulness, and I was also very into Buddhism and Taoism and all of that. So it led me, which I say was like divine providence, to mindfulness. And I became a mindfulness practitioner, a mindfulness meditation teacher. And then I realized so much of what I wanted to devote my time to was teaching mindfulness. And that's really what I do till today.
So I noticed that you're running a organization, and I guess it's really focused on teaching people how to be in that mindful place. Can you tell us a little bit about how you started your organization and a little bit about what you're offering through your organization?
Well, I started my organization, the IFTT, which stands for the Institute for Transformational Thinking, because really the thrust of my work is all based on transformation. And I also created a online certification training program for the Says Who method, which is a method that I created for my first book, Says Who, How One Simple Question Can Change the Way You Think Forever, which is basically a cognitive method that I developed for transforming negative and fear-based thoughts. And what really came to me as a life coach, which I was for 10 years, is that I realized the very thing that I was coaching people with was their thoughts. Do you know that was really the area that was getting people stuck, is not being able to change out the negative thinking for thoughts that were much more productive and life affirming, if you will. So I decided to coin a new aspect of coaching, which was the thought coach. And it really caught on. People really resonated to it because life coaching just felt too broad to me. What exactly are you coaching people? What aspects of their life are you coaching? And so I developed the Thought Coach program, which is under the umbrella of the Institute. And now all the work that I do, the workshops, the articles, the books, everything that I do, the certification program, is all under my organization, the Institute for Transformational Thinking.
Fantastic. So, this idea of the thought coach is great because, in my work, especially because I focus so much on trauma, people are really suffering with content in their mind that either comes in unexpectedly, or keeps playing over and over and over again. And it's just so exhausting and frustrating, especially if you feel you have no way to shake yourself out of that, negative inner dialogue. And, it sounds like you're trying to figure out how to help people with that piece of it. Could you tell us a little bit more about how you see that working?
Well, I think that our thoughts are the basis of everything, and, mindfulness is the practice of being present, and the awareness of the present moment. And, you're the trauma expert, I'm not, but from what I understand is so much of the traumas that we've experienced have mostly been out of our past. And what really stays in the present, and oftentimes we carry it into the future, are the thoughts that create the feelings, that create the behaviors, and then create the actions that are based on what has happened to us. And when you say exhausting, which it is, so much of what really repeats in the mind are the thoughts that we have around the experiences and or the traumas that we've experienced. So my work is really based on how to change those thoughts, not to diminish the experiences that we've had and to recognize the importance and the significance of them, but how are they really shaping the present time that we're in right now? Are our thoughts based on our previous experiences out of our past really impacting the quality of our life in the present? And that's what I really offer up. Something like the Says Who method does challenge the thoughts that keep us gripped, in the suffering. And a lot of that suffering is not necessary. And as we know, it can really feed on itself. And the next thing you know, you're very much at the effect of the thoughts that bring you down, that cause you even more suffering. So a lot of my skill sets and the techniques and the methodology that I subscribe to is how to really be productive in present time so that the quality of your life can be improved.
Okay, beautiful. Well, you raise a couple of different points. I mean, part of it is the mind, part of it is the body, part of it is how things get embedded, literally within inside of our cells when we're exposed to something very significant. And I really don't see very many people who haven't experienced something profoundly difficult. I mean, it's kind of the life path, I don't know anybody really, and I know a lot of people, and not just talking about the clinic work, but just, trauma is the great human equalizer. This is what we are all exposed to. We get exposed to things that are difficult. We all know what it's like to lose somebody that we care, we love, or experience an illness or an event that's very sudden and unexpected. But you raise a couple of different things. One is the difference between acute and chronic mental disturbances, and they do matter. Like looking at it through that lens actually matters a lot, because if we're looking at something very acute, because you said, most of this stuff is from the past, but, at some point we've got only the present, and sometimes the present can be very, very distressing and disturbing, and leave us exposed to something that is extraordinary, some terrible event that has occurred, some injustice, something that has left us, feeling that the world is unfair or an unsavory place. Those things can happen too. That's more of an acute experience in this moment when I experience, somebody saying something very cruel or acting in a way that is violent. That would be an acute event. And, something that's chronic would be me thinking about that event and not being able to get it out of my mind, no matter what I do, no matter how I try. I'm just stuck with this kind of loop. And that's the stuff of content that gets embedded. It gets embedded in the cells of our being almost, so that, something can trigger it off, a smell, a sound, a touch, can leave us with this mental, repetition that goes on and on. So do you understand what I'm saying about that?
Absolutely. Yes, I do, Anna.
Yeah.
I do. And I think you explain it well. What comes to mind to me is really, again, it's what I talk about a lot in all my books, and that is to be present with the thoughts that we have in present time. So, whatever is going on, whether it's a memory from the past, whether it's something that triggers us in the present, we know that what it evokes in us are thoughts that occupy the mind. And what I really encourage my readers or people that I, have in my workshops is to be with the very thing that you're thinking. It's okay, not to push it away, not to deny it, but to be with that thought, which will invariably connect you to the feeling of that thought. Sometimes people feel the feeling first, and then I say, let's explore the thought that's connected to that feeling, because I do believe there is a connection there. And the beauty of mindfulness is really helping us to be with the very thing that we are thinking and or feeling, and to give us permission to work with it. I'm feeling kind of sad today, and I don't really know why. Was it something that evoked that in the senses? A smell, a sound, a touch, a word? What could it be? When we practice mindfulness, we really give ourselves permission to be with whatever we are experiencing and not to judge it. And that's the beauty, again, of mindfulness. It's being in the present moment with acceptance and non-judgment. Well, that gives us, a lot of permission to be with what we have and discover what more we need to know about it that can help us. Because we really want to invite in the help so that we don't stay stuck in the stress or the suffering, as we know that it can loop in our mind over and over again. And before we know it, there's a, downward spiraling trajectory that can cause all sorts of things like depression. And, the next thing you know, you're in a mind state that has you suffering even more.
I mentioned this to you earlier, this idea that we can develop a kind of friendliness with these body experiences or the thoughts that go with them. Because I agree with you, these two things actually can be deeply disturbing. But when we develop a certain kind of approach that is willing and hopeful, that gives us a sense that we can approach these either negative thoughts or body sensations in a kind way. So, we're bringing that compassion towards ourselves, just like we might, a good friend or, somebody that we value in our life, rather than, these feelings and thoughts being a negative thing that we just want to shut down because we can't stand it,
Right.
So
Right.
kind of bringing that real willingness to grow through it. I want to read some of the messages that are coming in, if that's okay with you, Ora. This one is actually directly for you. This is from Cody, and Cody says, "Good afternoon. I just love Ora's books and her teachings, listening to you in Nashville, Tennessee."
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, well, thank you for joining us, Cody. If you have any questions or you want to add to the conversation, please do that as well. We would love to hear from you. And this is another one. This is from Frank. And Frank asks, where are your guests' books available? Can you address that, Ora?
Well, I'm here in Los Angeles, California, and hello to everybody who's not here, but out there. And, it connects us in such a lovely way. My books are available on, Amazon is a quick way to get my books. If you happen to have a bookstore near you, maybe perhaps they carry it, or, the book outlets like Barnes and Noble and Amazon is really the most accessible way to get my books, I should say, plural.
Yeah, and I'm going to add to that, and I'm going to just say, Ora has written a number of different books. One of the books is called Says Who, and that is available online. Live True, which is the Mindfulness Guide to Authenticity. And I'm going to ask you about this idea of authenticity, because I think it's a very, very interesting question. And I think it's a place that people can get very, very confused, this idea of authenticity, what that really means, what it looks like. Is authenticity something that somebody tells you is authentic, or is it something that lives inside of you? So we'll come back to that in a minute, because I think it's a really, really interesting idea. And then, of course, we have your brand new book, and that is Mindfulness and Mysticism. And this is connecting present moment awareness with higher states of consciousness. And we're going to come back to that in a minute as well, and maybe draw from all three of these books a little bit before the end of our meeting today. Now, one of the things I do want to point out is Ora has done a really beautiful job in Live True. In the end of each of the chapters, there's a little mini kind of gathering of your thoughts and meditation or reflection, contemplation, exercise. And the writing in those little excerpts is very clear. The language is very clear. So if you're looking for a guide to help you with just finding this capacity to reflect and contemplate, this is a really good one. The Live True, a Mindfulness Guide to Authenticity. So I want to just talk a little bit about this idea of authenticity. Can you talk a little bit about why the use of that word? What makes authenticity important?
Well, I coupled it with mindfulness because it just was very curious to me how mindfulness, as I said, is the practice of being present, and how do we show up in a moment? Who is showing up in the moment of their life, and it made me curious as to that, as we know, we can be many things to many people for many different reasons, so perhaps we show up at work because we have a persona and an expectation of who we have to be in the workplace. And then we come home and then we're different with our loved ones. We pivot into these different roles, if you will. And that also can be very exhausting. So what is really at the core of those different people that we are that show up in the moments of our lives as expected of us, or the expectations that we put on ourselves? And I said, if you really go deeper into that, there is always who we really are, no matter what situation we're in, and that to me is the true essence of who we are. And I feel that there are many people that, again, being at the effect of, let's say, an emotion or a feeling that something sometimes doesn't feel right for them. And with the people that I've worked with, they can confess to me that they feel that they're not being true to who they are, which for me really represents the authentic self. And we know by the definition of authentic or authenticity is real and genuine, So when we strip away, I say it's a lot harder to be who we're not than to be who we are. And that is very interesting to me because I like to take deep dives into the areas of which people really are the most uncomfortable. And in my practice, I do see that people are grappling, or, the people that I've worked with getting to the point where they don't want to be inauthentic anymore. They've kind of exhausted themselves. And it's very liberating to decide, well, maybe I want to change it up. Maybe I don't really want to continue being this person because it really is about people pleasing, or I'm really hiding aspects of myself because I'm afraid that I won't be accepted and or loved if I show all of the sides of myself. And that's really what Live True is about. Live True is about showing up in the moments of our life authentically, being who we really are to the best of our abilities.
Now, that is a very big ask, and one that I think is a really important place of growth on our human journey of evolution. Because for a lot of people, being inauthentic, this idea of being inauthentic or authentic, being inauthentic, not being ourselves, not showing up in a way that feels true to ourselves, was one that was born out of a need for our personal safety. So if we grew up in a place or in a way or in a family that made it clear to us that, let's say, loving art and music was completely unacceptable in the family that we were growing up in. It was seen as a ridiculous pastime, or, something that was rejected by the norms of the family. We may love art, but we may not allow ourselves to enjoy it or express it or have it even part of our lives in a small way. Even though we've recognized it's something central to who we are, we've learned through experience that it was rejected. And so we start rejecting that part of ourselves, even though we have a sense that we're cutting off something really important. Let's talk a little bit about how somebody might find their way back to the things that they know are true. Because I think that there is a journey that goes along with that.
Yes, Anna, and I love that you described that, because I think that plagues a lot of people. I think that there are messages that are sent very early on in childhood that who we are is not enough, or it's not okay, or it's not acceptable. So that message runs very deep. And I've worked with a lot of adults that are carrying over from childhood those messages, whether they were agreements that were made silently, or there was disapproval from a parent or an authority figure. And the beauty of present time is that we can change that. It's never too late to become who we really are. And I don't say that in just a pat, sort of easy way, but we can begin today. And I do think that there are wonderful opportunities that we can avail ourselves to, stepping forward and saying, I do want to maybe, people discover things about themselves late in life. They suddenly will pick up a paintbrush, they'll suddenly learn an instrument, they'll learn a new language, they'll take up dancing. I mean, that's the beauty of the spirit, that, you really can't, squelch the very thing that really is the vitality of who we are. Sometimes you just need to sort of move the things that have kept you from it away, so that you can have a wonderful discovery of what awaits you. And that's a lot of what I write about in Mindfulness and Mysticism. I just also want to add to that. I remember as a young woman reading Bernie Siegel, who, I don't know if anybody or maybe some remember. He was an oncologist, and he wrote a book. And I was really struck by him wanting to go deeper with his patients, and not just being a doctor who, unfortunately has to tell his patients that they're going to live or die based on their cancer diagnosis. And what really touched me was that he started to ask his patients what made them happy. What is it that they like to do? What is it that connects them to something that gives them peace? Questions that a lot of people perhaps don't ask themselves, and I bring that up through my work as well, is asking ourselves what feels, to use that word again, what feels genuine, what feels real, what feels authentic for you? How are you really expressing yourself in ways that connect you to some inner peace within yourself? I'm very much about the inquiry, and asking ourselves those questions. And what I also mention in my new book, Mindfulness and Mysticism, is take a spiritual pulse. Wake up in the morning and really connect to what is there, what is calling to you, what do you desire, what are you yearning? Give yourself the opportunity to listen to that voice deep within yourself.
Wow, beautiful. I am just touched by some of the things that you're saying right now, and again, looking at it through a trauma lens. Like when somebody experiences a very significant trauma, sometimes that's the beginning of their lives really falling apart, like crumbling. Like I don't know if you're familiar with Pema Chodron's books.
Yeah, I am.
Yeah. So, she's written like a whole bunch of different books that when things fall apart, and the places that scare you. And, what she really identifies is that life can really fall apart. And, we're left kind of going like, well, I don't even have a clue what my life is about. I don't even know what's important, what this is really, opening up to me. I feel so empty, so alone, so, out of sorts with myself. And, I think that can be really a pretty big step that, can occur in people's lives when things actually fall apart. And instead of there being something necessarily authentic, there can be kind of uncertainty and space, and also a sense of questioning, like, who am I really in all of this? Like, there isn't necessarily the answer of, well, who am I today, or what do I really like? I've had lots of people say to me, I don't have any idea of what I like anymore, and I don't know what being authentic actually means. I can't figure any of that out, because my life has just fallen apart, and what I thought I liked, what I thought was true, what I thought was important, how I even saw myself as a person, everything's gone now. So what do I know about life or being authentic or anything? So it's, yeah.
I understand that. I absolutely understand that there are people that are questioning that themselves and they can't access it. And, I love the word, Anna, remembering, and when people ask me a lot, well, what is it about mindfulness, or how did you become a mindfulness practitioner? Or, who were you, in the past before you became a mindfulness practitioner? And you know what, when people had asked me that, I started to go back to my childhood. And had I not been asked that, I probably wouldn't have remembered as readily that the things that really gave me tremendous pleasure was when I was really present. Things like, I used to love to climb trees. I used to love to lay on the grass and look up at the sky and watch the clouds move across it. And I would do this thing where I would close my eyes and then open them again, and the cloud would have moved. Like, where's that cloud? It's gone. What's interesting about a meditation practice is that in meditation, that is something that is described in relation to our thoughts. Think of your thoughts like clouds moving across the sky. They're impermanent. They never stay in the same place twice. So, what I'm really saying here is that memory from childhood, that pleasant memory, that memory that I was able to allow myself to go back to, capture, really can warm our hearts today, because I think sometimes it's not so easy to access those memories, especially if we're dealing with something like trauma or feelings that feel difficult for us. But if we give ourselves the time and we give ourselves the opportunity and even the permission, if you will, to venture back into the past, into the times that we can remember, that we recall when we laughed really, from our belly as a child. And what was that made us giggle or skip? I remember I was a big skipper as a child. I used to love to skip everywhere. I believe that we have a treasure trove of memories. Maybe perhaps we got to go into the attic and we got to dust things off, and we got to open up that chest, and it might be very squeaky and very dusty. But I would venture to say that there are memories within each of us that can connect us to who we really truly are.
And that is a great root in, that touchstone to those moments that brought simple joys. And that is that's a lovely place to kind of reflect and to give an anchor to a place where there may be moments of joy to unpackage as a root into what is true for me as a human being. How can I connect with that part of myself that can still come alive? And I just love the fact that you kind of identify this kind of becoming really who you are at any age. Like, that is such a hopeful reality that, this is part of how we become who we're supposed to be anytime now, in 10 years from now, at any time, in any moment, that we let ourselves really do that exploration, that it is time for us to begin. And, you know, I think this is the big thing. It's like we can say, yes, this is the beginning. We can have authenticity, but authenticity is not necessarily something you simply arrive at, but that you can unpackage over time using a variety of different approaches, recognizing there might be things that get in our way that make it difficult or challenging, but yet somehow we can find ourselves in this place where we're heading towards this, I am living true in this moment, and what that feels like. Because most people know what that feels like.
Yes.
Just those,
Yes.
you know, even if they're just tiny, tiny moments, like finding them, right?
Yes. And I also think, going back to the sort of self-talk, if you will, the inner dialogue, and that's a lot that I discuss about just, how do we really look at the thoughts that occupy our mind and how can we change them from negative to something more positive and life affirming. And, for anybody that maybe really, whether it's secret and they don't really share it with anybody and they keep it to themselves, that might say to themselves, wow, I'd really love to maybe learn how to, do the cha-cha, or I'd really love to, buy a canvas and start to paint. Be aware of the thoughts that follow that, because what you want to really acknowledge is that you have a desire to do that. And that oftentimes, Anna, we know what follows is that, oh, but I'm not really good at that, or, oh, I'm clumsy, or I'm never going to be good. This is the type of negative self-talk that really can take us away from the deep desire and yearning that we have within ourselves. And one of the questions from the Says Who method is, have I heard someone say this thought before? Because again, that might connect you to a memory that someone said to you in childhood, oh, you're clumsy. Oh, you're not really pretty enough to do that, or you're not really athletic enough to be an athlete. We really need to understand where those sabotaging thoughts come from. Are we feeding them to ourselves to really undermine the very desire or the discovery of finding out how to do something for the very first time in our lives, which can be very exciting? Are we giving in to those thoughts, whether they were someone else's opinion of who we need to be, or are we telling ourselves that, And you can quickly change that thought to something that will support you in taking that step towards discovering more authentic aspects of yourself. So if a thought comes up like, oh, I'm not going to be good at that, to quote the title of my first book, says who? Who is saying that thought in your mind? Is it something you're telling yourself, or do you remember someone saying that to you?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. So walk me through that, because I think that's a useful kind of reflection, this step-by-step process, this Says Who method of confronting the negative thoughts. Because, these kinds of obstacles, they're universal. I mean, everybody faces this kind of stuff, moments where we think, well, maybe I could take up dance, and then no, that's silly, I'm already, past all that, or, what a ridiculous way to spend your time. Don't you have more important things to do? Whatever the negative dialogue is, it doesn't matter. Walk me through this process so I have a better sense of it, and so our listeners can have a better sense of it too. And again, I will just say that if people are listening and you have a question about this or want to add to it, then do feel free to send an email instudio101@gmail.com.
Well, the Says Who method is a 7 question method to really challenge those negative and fear-based thoughts that perhaps will take us away from going after what we want, what we desire, do you know? And the question says who really is who is saying this thought in my mind. And I really commend anybody who takes that first step to ask themselves, says who, do you know, to really look at their thoughts carefully, do you know, to really be with them, to take a deep dive into the thoughts that are getting in the way of you realizing what you want in your life. Truly, do you know? So the says who question says who is saying this thought in my mind, you know, to say I am, you know, that's that declaration, that honesty to say, you know, I am telling myself that I am not good enough, you know, is a real admittance. And I again commend anybody who's willing to step forward with themselves and say, you know what, I'm willing to admit that to myself, that I am the one that is telling myself that I am not enough. You know, and the questions that follow that, and I won't go into every single question, you know, unless you want me to, and of course they can read it in the book. But you know, I basically diluted them to questions that made sense to me, that I would ask myself simply a thought that was negative, and I would say, you know, I don't like that thought. It's not very likable. There's nothing likable about this thought. It's not supporting me. It's not encouraging me. It's not inspiring me. So one of the says who questions is, do I like this thought? And that really stops people in their tracks. You know, I love to see people's reaction to these questions, because if I were to say to someone who says, I'm not good enough, and I ask them, do you like that thought? Well, you know, I've had people laugh. I've had people, you know, do all sorts of things where they'll go, no, I don't like that thought. I actually hate that thought. And I'll say, okay, well, let's be with that. You are telling yourself a thought that you're telling me you not only dislike, but you actually hate. How about changing it to a thought that you do like? You know, that we can change a negative thought again to a positive thought. I have something in Says Who called the release and replace method that I use today. I just did a workshop recently and I used it. And I have to tell you, I mean, I can't even describe to you how much fun it is, but it really is about taking, I give people these Post-its that say release and replace on it. And I say, write down a negative thought. You know, many times people say, oh, can I write more than one? Does it have to be just one thought? I said, let's start with one. So they, you know, I can see them very, you know, passionately writing down this thought, you know, and I have them crumple up the piece of paper and I tell them to throw it. And I say, and throw it like you really mean it. And I've oftentimes been on a stage, I've been right in front of them, and I've got these balls of paper just being flung at me. And my question to them is, okay, now do you want to go take that piece of paper off the floor, you know, unfold it and put that thought back in your head? And they're like, no, absolutely not. Good riddance to that thought. I go, okay, now I want you to write down in the replace Post-it its positive counterpart. And you could just see a whole shift in their facial expressions, you know, and they write down its positive counterpart from, you know, I am not worthy to I am worthy. I matter, you know, whatever. They write down all sorts of things. And I say, okay, so I want you to look at what you wrote down. Do you want to crumble that up in a ball and throw it across the room? And they go, no, I don't. And I say, yeah, because that's what you replace that negative thought with. And that's the thought that you want to hold on to. That's the one that you want to have occupy your mind. Take that Post-it and stick it on your mirror, your refrigerator. Do you know? So I have a lot of techniques and methods and Says Who, all the Says Who questions, you know, that really have helped people understand that thoughts can be changed. They are not permanent. As I like to say, our thoughts don't hold on to us, we hold on to them.
Yes, absolutely. And boy, do we ever hold on to them to the point that a lot of people would actually benefit from these strategies, but they may be very resistant to them. And then what do you do in those cases, Ora?
Anna, as I'm sure you've encountered many times, resistance is, there for a lot of people, whether it's the fear of going into the unknown, it's the unwillingness to let go of what's familiar to you. There's all sorts of reasons why people resist, you do have to take that step forward to meet yourself. I say it's meeting yourself, and I present that to people. They either want to or they don't. I don't think I can really convince somebody to take that step unless they want to. But I very much encourage them to give themselves the chance to do so because I remember I had an acting teacher, and I was an actress in my late teens and my early 20s. And whenever an actor would stop and go, oh, I just don't, I can't, I don't feel it. I don't feel it. And they would stop themselves from the scene that they were in where they were actually doing quite well. And she would say, cross the street and then find out why you couldn't. Like, there's something about doing something. It's in the doing, if you will. So for those that are resistant, I ask them, are you willing to try? Are you willing just to try? And my exercises, Anna, are very user-friendly. They really are. I mean, there isn't anybody that I don't think could benefit from trying all of the different exercises that I offer up in Says Who in all my books, really. I have exercises, I have, techniques, I have meditations, I have all sorts of things for you to just try it and see how it makes you feel. And when I see them going from writing a negative thought down and furrowing their brow to writing its positive counterpart, and it looks like the weight of the world has been lifted off their shoulders, I want people to experience that on their own. And the only way for them to do it is to try.
Absolutely. And that is one of the kind of the biggest steps, I think, when people are moving into strategies for growth and healing, kind of moving ourselves towards our own evolution, it takes courage. And, I talk about courage almost every show that I have. And I think one of the things that you're bringing is simple strategies to bring this to an audience of people who have a willingness. But also, even if you're not willing, what does it take to just take that one little step using tools for self-reflection, for self-knowledge, and kind of moving in that direction in a way that may be possible for you in this moment. So just having a willingness to go forward. Can you tell us a little bit about what was happening with you when you were starting to move out of the Live True mindfulness book and into the book on mindfulness and mysticism? What was going on that was bringing you to this new book?
That's a very good question. Thank you. I actually have a feeling state of what I was experiencing when I really went towards writing this book. Having written Live True and really exploring the whole notion of showing up in the moments of our lives true to who we really are. And I loved that journey, and people were very receptive to it. And that was so wonderful. I wanted to take mindfulness to a whole new level because from my experience as someone who has, devoted my life to the journey of mindfulness and recognizing the benefits of it are just so vast and so extraordinary. I wanted to be able to convey or take my reader on a journey of what it means to go into these incredible places that sometimes are almost ineffable. They're hard to really put into words that I had experienced, and that is the area of mysticism. And, for those that are maybe not familiar with what mysticism means, because that can sound very esoteric or metaphysical, I wanted to bring the mystical experience into the 21st century and into our daily lives or our lives as we know it. And what I was really tapping into, Anna, was that I would have, and I've had them since, again, going back to childhood. And if you ask people the question, do you remember a time in your life that felt just so magical to you, so special, so exquisite that, you didn't even really put it into words. That's what I wanted to go deeper into, those moments of being present. I used two examples in Mindfulness and Mysticism, one with Evelyn Underhill, who was a Christian mystic, and how she had a mystical experience walking down, a street in Notting Hill. And she literally connected to what she described as being in union with reality, which is her definition, or one of her definitions of mysticism. And then Jane Goodall, the primatologist, who was literally, somewhere working with the animals, where she had this altered state of consciousness, if you will. She felt so deeply connected to everything in that moment. And that has been described as, it can be called oneness. It can be called unity consciousness. For people, it can be a religious experience. It can be a spiritual experience. So that's a lot of what I delve into the book. And I wanted to go deeper. I wanted to say, wow, when we're present, there is a plethora of amazing experiences that we can have the more we drop into the moment. And it's very exciting, and it's very wondrous. And I hope that in the book, I do take my reader on that journey, which many people say that I have. And that excited me. So I wanted to take that journey. I wanted to take mindfulness to a whole other level. And I feel that I have.
That's beautiful. I want to read a quote that you put at the beginning of that book. It's by Albert Einstein. The most beautiful and profound emotion we can experience is the sensation of the mystical. He to whom this emotion is a stranger, who can no longer wonder and stand wrapped in awe, is as good as dead. To know that what is impenetrable to us really exists, manifesting itself as the highest wisdom and the most radiant beauty, which our dull faculties can comprehend only in their primitive forms. This knowledge, this feeling is at the center of true religion. It's a really beautiful example that just helps you a tiny bit to remember what that might be, because I think this is accessible to everybody. I just don't think everybody is in a place where we are open to this sense of the profound that is always alive within inside of us. Can you
Yes.
talk a little bit about that?
And I'm glad you read the quote by Einstein, because that quote really very much resonated for me. I did the exploring because I didn't want to write a book on religion per se, or have it be just within the confines of a religious context, and that we can experience the wondrous, the extraordinary, the ineffable, the sublime, bliss, euphoria, whatever you want to call it. We can bring that into our lives. Yes, it doesn't occupy our life every single moment of the day. I love this quote. I'm going to throw in another quote by French philosopher Pierre Teilhard de Chardin, which is, we are spiritual beings having a human experience. And so again, I can only write what really sparks an interest and curiosity in me. And that is that, I understand that maybe it's far reaching for a lot of people. A lot of these ideas that I'm offering up can be something that maybe perhaps you've never experienced, or perhaps you have and you didn't know what it was, or you didn't know what to call it. So maybe I'm a good journey woman to go with you to remember. I'm basically holding space to say, let's take this journey together, and perhaps you will remember what you have forgotten. So even though it might be something that is unknown to people, perhaps is foreign to them, or maybe even scary, because they don't really know what this is, So I like to just invite you in. And again, like what we talked about earlier, Anna, if you're willing to be open, and if you want to discover more about yourself on the life journey, to give yourself permission to take these steps to learning more, and to discovering more, and to experiencing more.
Mm-hmm. Beautiful. I'm going to read some of our emails that are coming in. This one is from Irene, and she says, "Hi, very interesting show. I am a new fan of Ora's. Thank you for sharing." So I think people are picking up on what it is that you have to offer here. This one is from Joe, and he says, "Post-it note brilliance." So obviously that landed well. I think sometimes people take notes when they're listening to this show because we tend to have some kind of practical tools and tips. This is a really good one. I agree, Joe, that release and replace method, I think you called it, Ora, which was just lovely. And this one is from Larry, who says, "I am inspired after listening. Very welcoming. Thanks for making my day." It's so nice. I mean, like I said, we do have very engaged people who are listening. And this also comes from the Mysticism book. And this is actually a foreword by His Holiness the 14th Dalai Lama, who says, "When we encounter problems in life, the practice of mindfulness, being mentally aware, helps us gain a more realistic perspective on our situation and on what might be causing us difficulty. As we become more accustomed to this practice, we will see that our mind can be trained and that our negative thoughts and feelings can be transformed into more positive states of mind, thereby weakening the influence of negative emotions. Our ensuing peace of mind will now enable us to be positive in life." And so, I guess it's more to reinforce this idea that, we can start this journey of noticing how powerful our minds are, but also recognizing that we can harness our mind, that we can allow ourselves to recognize that you don't have to just let the busyness in your mind drag you along like an unwilling puppet, but instead you can understand that there are practices and methods for allowing you to be able to harness and direct some of these profound inner mental energies. And I just want to say, one thing, I had been thinking a little bit about the fluctuations of the mind, being a yoga practitioner for a long time. And I was thinking about, yoga really started with somebody named Patanjali, or the Patanjali Yoga Sutras.
Yes.
And, there's 196 of them or something like that. And they were written more than 2,000 years ago, believe it or not. It's kind of remarkable because, what Patanjali starts with is, okay, at first we practice, and, we start this practice. In your case, it's the practice of mindfulness. In Patanjali's yoga, it's the practice of yoga, which has elements of breathing and movement, asanas, and breathing, pranayama. But, the next sutra is really all about the fact that we can start to work to still the fluctuations or the busyness in our mind. But then, hilariously enough, he goes on to say, because it's not so simple as just, settling the fluctuations of your mind. Patanjali goes on to amplify these two first sutras. First you start, and then you can start the second one, stilling the fluctuations or the busyness in your mind, with another 194 other instructions to help you in a technical way to arrive at that state of stilling your mind. So my only point being, hey, everybody listening out there, don't think that you're just starting with mindfulness and all of a sudden you're in this calm state. That, there's many, many steps. It's a complex process, that there's loads and loads of practice. And I really believe in practice. I think that anybody who really starts to cultivate this settled state of mindfulness takes on a willingness to practice it. It's something to attain. It's not something to immediately arrive at. And we had started our conversation with that, Ora, that, this is more about recognizing that you don't just arrive, but that you're practicing, and that you take that on, and that you enrich it over time, and, really allow yourself to build that capacity over time.
Yes. And Anna, and also to really tell your listeners that these practices don't have to be something that you approach begrudgingly. Like, there are a lot of people that don't want to exercise. They don't want to do it because, they don't think it's enjoyable or it's fun or, it's unpleasant for them. Actually, the beauty of mindfulness and the practice, and it is do it at your own pace, do one thing a day, if you will, is that it can be enjoyable. Something like mindfulness eating. Let's just do that. I wrote a piece many, many years ago for the Huffington Post called "Your Morning Cup of Tea or Coffee Can Be Your Meditation." Take something that you do, and it could be like drinking your morning cup of tea or coffee. And instead of rushing into your local Starbucks or Coffee Bean or whatever they have in, Canada, I don't know, to be able to sit quietly, it really asks very little of us, by the way. For those that think they don't have any time, can you spare 5 minutes or 10 minutes? That's a good question to ask yourself. Sit with your cup of tea or coffee. It's a great exercise. It turned out to be very popular, and that I really, I suggest sit quietly, find somewhere that's quiet. Don't grab the cup of coffee and jump into your car or your Uber, but feel the warmth of that cup in your hand. Feel the warmth of when you are about to drink that sip of tea or coffee. What does it feel like? When you take your first taste, I drink chai tea in the morning. I love my very first taste of the chai tea. It's as if I'm tasting it for the first time all over again. Or I can taste the sweetener of the almond milk or the soy milk or the oat milk that I put in it. It becomes a new experience every time you do it. Well, this is joyful. I mean, you actually, rather than begrudge these practices, you might surprise yourself that you rather enjoy it.
Yes, absolutely. Now, I will say that we are going to close now. It was an absolute delight to speak with you, Ora. Thank you for everybody out there. Ora, it was a pleasure.
Thank you, Anna. I so enjoyed it. And thank you to your listeners who participated.
Great. Have a great day, everyone. Be gentle with yourself, and I'll see you next month. Be well.
Thank you for listening to the Bear Psychology Radio Show with psychologist, author, and speaker, Dr. Anna Baranowski, right here on Reality Radio 101.